right, so John, what is the name of your book?
Secrets, the Chords of Allan Holdsworth.
And what led you to write this book?
Uh, Really, it was for me. I, when I started learning a few of Allan's tunes, there's sort of like an ignorance about his playing because it's so complex. So I decided to learn a few songs, and as I learned them, I noticed I always thought that like every song had like 1,000 unique chords in it, but I started to notice that there were some chords that were the same in some tunes. So I said, hey, it'd be really cool if I can like find sort of the common chords that Allan used. And I'll just make a little thing for myself and I'll learn. I'll get some cool voicings and stuff like that. And a few people said, hey, you should release this. I was like, all right. So then if I was going to do that, I had to go through every tune that I could, every different thing, and verify as much as I can to get as many chords in there as possible. So it's its own little like dictionary of Allan's voicings. But it was primarily for me, just so I can learn them. I don't even know all of them, but it was just, oh, that's a cool one. Yeah.
What I love about the book is you're not trying to be an expert, and you're actually like you're using a lot of Alan's own language and the techniques that he described in like in his teaching video. What was the name of the hot shots? Is it hot licks or something video?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I love that you you start um, way further back than I anticipated in terms of music theory. So talk through like why did you start talking about the composition of chords, and the degrees of a scale and how to build like a major seven chord and all that stuff. Why start there?
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out because my kind of aim was like if I'm gonna do this kind of book, I want it for everybody because, like I said, there's sort of like a an intimidation factor with Allen stuff, and the whole idea was it's really not as complicated as it can be. Of course, some of the chords are kind of crazy, but they don't necessarily have to be. But the beauty of it was the freedom of playing. Like you don't have to particularly like get a certain shape or it's very free. So I said, you know what? I If someone's never took music theory, let me see if I can like give them these real generalizations about how chords are built, but also why some of those chords are so unique because there are a lot of constraints with music theory on how to name some of them. So I wanted to actually express like this is a chord that's valid, but we don't really have a name for it with normal music theory. So it was just to get people who have never really understood theory, maybe to give them a better understanding, or people that already are familiar with theory to understand how sort of unique of a concept that it kind of is. And that's what I found so exciting about it because it was so free and it was so kind of simple. So for me, I'm not thinking of chords as it has to follow a specific form. It was more like just parts of a scale, which is exactly how Allan thinks about it. And it's funny because when he had that instructional video, I watched it and I was so uh, ignorant. Like, okay, I know what he's doing. Like, I got his old game down. This was like 2007 or whatever. And his instructional video is not great because like you get Paul Gilbert's and it shows you all these examples, and with Allan's there isn't. But now that I've spent so much time with his music, I realize how simple it is at a chord. It's just four notes that are part of a scale, and it doesn't really make a difference what order you put them in. Who says the root has to be the lowest note? Why not put it as the highest voice of the chord and then put the extension on the bottom? So to illustrate some of that, I felt like I had to sort of translate Allan's language, and I think I put that in the book. Like Allan had his own language, and I kind of know the traditional language, and I'm trying to like bridge the gap between them because there's not a lot of common ground. So I guess that's maybe the long-winded answer for it.
Tell us about the importance of inversions, like C major 7 inversion. I know Alan talks about that in his instructional video, but I feel like you lay it out in a very clear way. Tell us about the importance of inversion in playing in the style of Allan Holdsworth?
Well, the concept, luckily because of inversions, we can actually name some of those chords. And one of the things that I came to really realize about Allan's playing is, of course, when he plays a chord, he's not thinking of it as a one size fit all, as like we play a D major and it's just a D major. Sometimes he'll have a chord shape that belongs to a scale, but depending on the context, that chord could be called in a bunch of different ways, and sometimes it has to do with how it's inverted. So, for example, like with C major 7, C, E, G, B. That's how everyone sort of thinks about it. But Allan might play it as B, G, C, and then E, or something like that. And, oh, there it is. So, even though B, let's say, might be the root of how like the bass is playing and what it kind of sounds like, trying to name it is really difficult. So using the concept of inversions, of basically just being able to start the lowest note of the chord, could be any degree, makes it a lot easier to kind of name some of these chords, even though functionally they might not be correct. Sometimes it's the only way to actually get a name for some of those chords.
Yep. And now talk a little bit about voicings. Like this 1 2 5 6 example, you've got a C major scale, and then you're starting on then you're going through each mode. So there's the second mode starting on D, third mode
Yeah,
starting on E, and 1 2 5 6 for each of these chords, meaning in the first scale degree you got C, D, F, and oh, I'm sorry, C, D, G, and A, 1 2 5 6.
yeah.
So is this how Allan, is this how you've seen him building chord voicings? Like he'll take a scale degree or a mode and then pick, a cluster of notes and then stay within the scale or the key, but change, walk through the modes?
Yeah, sometimes he would do that. A lot of times when he writes a tune, he kind of writes it in a specific kind of voicing, even though it might not follow a key diatonically. It just sort of follows that kind of structure. So the he doesn't really particularly, I'm not like I'm him and I know everything about him, but
Sure, yeah.
it seemed to be, for me, he would just play these chords as parts of a scale. And then sometimes he would just sort of move that kind of interval stack up and down. I don't think he did that for, every possible combination of notes that you can have. It's very free. Like if I'm playing an E minor, I just know all the notes that I have available and I can kind of pick whatever they are. The reason why I put that in the book was more like normal chord names are built off of tertiary harmony, or harmony built in thirds, 1 3 5 7, yada yada yada. But a lot of Allan's chords, they don't follow that tertiary harmony. So if you try to pick, and I use this as an example, the first, second, fifth, and sixth degree of a scale, you can get a cool and interesting sounding chord. But as you move through the scale diatonically, sometimes the name, there's no real name for it. That's why I have E with the three question marks, because there's no official name for it. So Allan, his voicings would kind of be built like that, but not necessarily like I'm going to write a whole song in C major and do this kind of thing. It was more like he would have sort of go-to chords that he would like to play within a specific key. Didn't really make a difference what order that those notes would sort of be in.
Awesome. So, another thing I love about this book is that it's more like a chord dictionary instead of um, here's how to play like Allan Holdsworth, or like here's how to think about scales, when you're soloing. I appreciate a lot that you're trying to get into the basics of playing some of these chords, and some of them I was like, oh, this actually isn't. You're not starting with the most complex thing, like this minor add 9 chord. This is something a lot of people play, but I'm glad that you talk through like what is a decent fingering for that, or a major chord, because you have to start somewhere, right? And I'm sure you see this in your lessons. So can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about like starting from the right place?
Yeah, it's tough because everyone's different. Everyone's hands are built a little bit different. So the idea that I've got from Alan is really just complete freedom and just really just abandoning the rules. He gets sort of a reputation because his chords are so complicated or so difficult to play because not only he had large hands, but he liked chords that were very closely voiced. So all the notes are very close together, like on a piano. But you don't have to necessarily think like that in order to have to play, like to get his sort of sound. He would take just sometimes some of his chords would just be really sort of straightforward and simple in terms of what you're doing with your left hand. It's how you're thinking of those notes within the key. It's just like a free for all. It's just you're playing in C major. Every note has equal footing to Allan. Every note is the same. It doesn't really make a difference. So to apply that same kind of idea to this book was sort of like, okay, here is some of like that's a crazier type of chord, and it was more of an illustration of sort of how to use your hand so you don't hurt yourself and really playing on using the side of your hand in order to do that.
Right.
But a lot of the chords in nature sometimes are just very simple. So here's like a major chord. You start with that. Then maybe add the 9. And then maybe try to think outside of it if your hand can kind of reach those notes. Or sometimes just taking a structure and then just seeing what notes are around it in the key that you're in and try to add some extensions or just, to play around with it. And one of the things that made me excited to learn some of Allan's stuff is I'm not a tall guy. I'm like 5'7", and I don't have particularly large hands. So it's more of a surprise to me that I can play some of these. And I realize if I can do them, then pretty much anyone else can do it. But as you know, because you did the beginning of Nevermore, you got to really make sure that you have to know what your limits are, and you don't overreach your ability and end up hurting yourself. Which is why I try to put that in the book to say, a lot of times it's technique and how you hold your hand, and sometimes you do have to get a little bit of a pain in your hand, just a little bit, just to know that it's working, but not to really dwell on it in order to stretch those ligaments and muscles and all that kind of stuff. But it's really, it's tough to say a lot of this stuff because it's so personal to how you want to play. And that's why I made it sort of like a dictionary. Like, these are all the chords that I saw Allan use.
Yep.
Maybe some of those chords he might have a major version but no minor version, so you can take that and just change it. And also I had to sort of categorize it by mode to say, oh, if you're like just want to use it as like, I want a cool voicing for a major 7 sharp 11, you can pick one. Maybe one works better, or give you some sort of idea of how to use it. So the concept of the book was more like, this is your sort of playground. Now it's up to you how you want to use it. You want to find cool chords. You want to use it for understanding how Allan sort of thinks of chords and all that kind of stuff. It's up to you how you want to use it. And I thought that would work best for most people. And as I said before, it's what makes Allan's instructional video really not that great, is because he found something that works for him, and you can take that same approach to yourself and create your own chords and your own style. It's with that kind of mindset. So it's not it's very general. So to the average person, you might go like, oh, well, I didn't learn anything from it. But when you really understand it, you realize like you don't have to play things how he did or do them a certain way. This is that kind of freedom. And with the book, it's like, oh, these are all the chords that I've seen him play. You can choose them, or maybe just come up with something cool, or take something from it and alter it. So I've had people tell me that, oh, I went through the book and I took these chords and I kind of came up with my own and did all this kind of stuff. I said that's exactly why I wanted people to what I wanted them to get from it really is their own sort of freedom, not necessarily copying Allan, which honestly, if you want to do that, I'm a big proponent of you play however you want, but at least this is the first step into, and when I would when I would find these chords, I'd go, wow, that's such a cool voicing I never thought of, or I never thought about playing this chord like that. that's really interesting, and it made me excited to like, okay, now I have a cool simple chord shape that I can use, and now because it's I categorized it by type, I know how I can use it. I need a major seven voicing, I put them all together. Um, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, another thing I really love about your top 10 Holdsworth chords video is you'll say, okay, now this, some people might be saying, well, what about this chord? But there is an easier way to play it. It's just Alan chose to play the chord that way. So, another nice thing about the way you teach is do what you're able to do, not what Alan specifically did. And I doubt Alan would have said, this is the way anything must be played, because I don't think he ever played the same thing two nights in a row, even if he had the same set, you know?
Oh yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, it boils down to like, can you actually grab these chords? Now, most of the time when Alan's playing a chord, it's very rare that he'll play the same note twice in it. So he won't play a chord that has like two C's in it. Every note is kind of unique. And if you really want to get that sound, you have to be able to play them all. But sometimes there's an easier way of doing it that might not be very obvious. Actually, one of the things I wanted to do is in material reel, which I think it's been so long since I watched. I don't like watching myself and that kind of stuff. So I think I named that number one, the material reel chord.
Yeah,
The,
well,
yeah,
probably four or five of the chords are just from Material Real, if I
yeah.
remember
That song is
correctly.
just a. I think I said that was the hardest one. It just has so much crazy stuff in it. But I found a couple of simpler ways of playing that chord, and then I don't know, maybe a month after, I went, oh wait a minute, you can play it like this, but now it's on there. I can't go back and I change it. But yeah, or sometimes I'll tell people this note is not that important. In the lesson view, you can remove this. And for that exact same reason of giving people the opportunity to play how they want to play it. And I've seen people do not covers of they'll just like sort of take my lesson video and kind of, oh, okay, I learned how to play this and I'm going to play it. And sometimes it's not 100%, and it's not because that they're bad players. It's just they wanted to choose sort of a different path, whether the chord was too difficult for them or they liked how this sounded a little bit better. Because again, it's all personal, and how
Yeah.
you want to play. And that I remember a long time ago. I would just want to sidebar on a story. I had a friend of mine. He came over to my house. I showed him like some Nirvana songs and like a major seven chord or something, and then I never really saw him again. And then like 10 years later, I saw him, and he said he went to school for jazz. And at that time, I didn't play jazz. I still don't play jazz. I'm not, to be honest, I'm not even a huge fan of it. I love Alan's stuff because it's more like classical inspired. But I remember asking him so much, like, what about this and what about that? And he just goes, "You're thinking too much." And I was like, it didn't click with me at the time. Now, after like really going through Alan's stuff, I realize, yeah, it's not about the details. It's about the larger picture. It's about making things, like if you're playing an E minor, you don't have to play this crazy version. You can play this simpler version, something that works for your hand if, you can't stretch. It's not a big deal. It's that thought process of, you know, disregarding the rules of harmony, really saying you can't, E has to be the lowest note, make it the highest note. Don't even put E in there, but play what works for you. And that kind of freedom was really exciting to me because I never thought about playing it like that. Even in my own band stuff, I play in a prog metal band, and usually it's kind of like Dream Theater in a way where everything has to be pieced a certain way in order for it to work. But there are times where I have a little bit of freedom and said, okay, well, I know I have to play G minor add 9. Let me play it like this instead. Let me play it sort of like that, and it's a little bit different every time, and that's exciting to me. And I wanted to bring that kind of freedom and excitement to other people that are not familiar with it, like how I was. I was so neurotic about the details. Why can't you put this note? And why can't you do this? And why can't you do that? So it's a very personal approach.
It is, and I feel that something that people miss just purely listening to Alan's music is it's not, I don't know, this will sound terrible, but I don't think it's really music to listen to. it's like it's nice to listen to, but I feel like when you play it, then you start hearing the melody. When you when you're playing through these songs, you can start identifying what he's actually doing. But I think most people, when they hear it, they don't hear a melody because often what Alan's doing with a melody is burying it, with three or four other notes at a time, and then
Yeah,
that's just the head,
yeah,
in many of his songs, and then he just starts soloing. And I think people they look for a lot of the finger acrobatics, but
yeah,
when you start playing it, it's like, oh, that's beautiful. That's like this is really beautifully composed. And it I think one of Alan's I don't know, I don't want to call it a fault, but maybe like sort of a gate between him and the common listener is I think you really have to understand music two or three levels above what everyone else is listening. Not in a pretentious way, but it's more like uh, you have to discover what he's doing melodically and chordally. Otherwise, it just sounds like if I put on Allan Holdsworth, my wife is like, "Why are you listening to this? Do you like this? Is there something to like about this?" I don't know if you feel that way, but as I've learned to play some of Alan's music, it's definitely like more enriching to play through it than it is to listen.
absolutely. Am I allowed to tell two quick stories?
Yeah, yeah. Tell
Oh,
share as much as you like.
yeah, because I have such a weird history with music and with Alan to begin with. I think I remember hearing about Alan's name. I think I downloaded like a bunch of power tabs, and of course I listened to them and went, "This is nonsense. This is just random notes. They don't make any sense." Um, then I got the REH video. I think it was REH, and I watched it, and I was like, "Yeah, I know his style. Like, I got it. I still don't like the music, but I remember not liking Looking Glass, which is funny because it's what the chords on the screen are. So I remember not really liking that tune, but it's like I had to learn it because anytime something poses a challenge, sometimes it bothers me. Like speaking of King Crimson, the first time I heard Frame by Frame, the pentatonic part, I was like about to sleep in my bed, and I just put it on, and I heard it, and I went, I can't do that. I don't think I could do that. And I got right up and I had to learn it and I had to play it. So I had that kind of same thing with Alan with Looking Glass. I can't do that, but I have to do it, even though I wasn't really a huge fan. So I saw him live and it was a great experience, but I didn't know any of the tunes. Then, I don't know, years later, I said, you know what? I think it's time for me to give it another shot. Like every few years, I would give it another shot. And I've been playing guitar at that point for, I don't know, 20 years. And I still
Yeah.
didn't get it. I love Meshuggah. I love some of this other stuff, but I couldn't hear it. So I have a friend of mine, Eric Wollman, who I helped credit in the book as a thank you. I went to him and I was talking. He's a huge Alan fan, and I was talking to him about it. And I was like, I remember distinctly listening to the first IOU album and like White Line, and listening to the beginning. Like I kind of like how it starts, but then it like goes somewhere, and then it's too weird. And I was telling these things to Eric, and especially with Alan's playing, it sounds so random. And he goes, "Well, Alan actually plays very diatonically," and I went, "Oh yeah, all right. Well, let me go back and listen." And I went back and listened, and I'm not even joking. It was like a light bulb went off. All of a sudden, I heard it. I started to understand that the melody of the chords that Alan was playing was usually the top note of the chord.
Yeah.
So once I had something to sort of hang my hat on, then I was able to hear the melodies and where the song was going, and especially understanding his sort of love for um, modern classical, where it's real just a lot of non-functional harmony and voice leading. So you have sometimes a somewhat diatonic melody, but the chords underneath it are making it sound like it's weaving in between keys and it's modulating. I started to get it. And it was like I needed more and more of it. So yeah, as I started to understand and where the tunes are going to go, even like with the soloings, one of the next video that I want to do was actually talking about how Alan, his approach to soloing. And I'm doing a lot of research. And one of the problems about following Alan's solos is that the form that he's playing against, the head, is sometimes so bizarre that it's hard to follow. Sometimes dissonance will just happen out of nowhere, not like an expected like, oh, it's it's a 5-1, so you're expecting tension and then result. Sometimes it's just unnatural, or things hold out for 7 beats and then they're 4. So it's hard to follow it. But once you know that structure and what to anticipate, then it's really exciting. And it's funny that we're doing this. Tomorrow is the anniversary of his passing. I just put up a video in the Unreal Allan Holdsworth group, which is where like I never say my name in any of the videos because I only think only those people see them. So I'll put it on YouTube and I just put it there and then that's it. So I did a cover of a tune called "So Long" off of Flat Tire, and now this is me being into Allan stuff for at least 3 years, listening to it almost every day, and that album, it just never clicked with me. And then
Yeah,
one day,
too weird, man.
I was starting to transcribe those tunes because a lot of the times the lesson videos that I do are just ones that I'm really confident in. A lot of the other stuff with syntax, it sounds right, but who knows what's going on, or sometimes the tuning is weird. And this particular tune, the top 3 strings are actually tuned an octave lower. So it's impossible to play on a real guitar. I actually had to play it on keyboards, but I can transcribe it. And as I started transcribing it, I was able to understand the tune, and I got such a deep appreciation for that tune. Like I can feel what Allan was trying to come across. It's kind of like a very somber kind of tune, but there's a lot of weird tensions here and there that if you're not familiar with it, it just sounds like a cat walking across a piano. But the more sort of in tune that you don't think of the tension in a way that's like, okay, this chord sounds ugly because you want it to resolve to this chord. It's really sort of creating emotion that tenses to make you feel unsettled. And that tune is such a sad and sort of despondent and tense. I think I described it as like the pain of losing someone. It's not just always sad, but it's also like an anger.
Right.
And I started to understand why those chords sounded so weird. And as I transcribe some stuff more and more, I understand it deeper, and I end up appreciating it a lot more. So I clearly remember a part of my life where I was not an Allan fan because I didn't get it. Even the other guy in my band, Greg, is always, because I'll be playing something at rehearsal and just say, oh, it just sounds random. And it kind of does in a way until you really know what to expect and what to hear. And there's really nothing like it. And that's what's so exciting to me about it. It's blending this sort of modern classical sort of playing like Debussy and all those guys, but then having a structure to freely improvise over that with sort of like a rock sound. And the chords are very piano-like, where they're very unconventional. There's just no blend that's kind of like it. And
Yeah.
once you get to that level, yeah, and it is a problem. Sometimes I wish for Allan's family he would have just taken the check. Like, okay, I'm just going to write an album that just makes money or whatever. But I have to respect his integrity to the art of his,
Yeah.
this is what I want to play, and this is what I want to hear. And it seems to be, at least for my life, a lot of the artists that I really love and I respect, that's what they do, even if it's to their detriment. And to Allan's, it is to his detriment because the music is not accessible to everybody. But the people that do get it, they understand it, I think, in such a deeper way that there's almost nothing like it.
Yeah, definitely. So,
Sorry, those weren't short stories. I actually had to. I'm very verbose, I'm terrible at writing. So when I wrote the whole book, I gave it to Greg. He is Terriginous, really, and he offered to edit it. So
uh,
if a lot of it makes some sort of coherent sense, it's because he was able to take my free form, because I wrote it just free form and just like how I
mhm.
would teach it, and then he just like, okay, this is what you meant. So instead of saying it in 5 sentences, I said it in 2.
Mm,
So
that's cool. That's cool. So, a majority of the book, basically the last 40 pages or so, are just chord charts, and
I
it
did
was
those
really
all by
cool.
hand.
Yeah, it was really cool playing through a lot of them too, because I was like, oh, this is what he's doing. This I know where I've heard this. This chord in 16 Men of Pain or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, but when I was playing through them, I thought, why the heck didn't this guy just play piano?
Yeah,
You know,
well,
like all of his chords are like right next to each other on the keys, but on the
yeah,
guitar they turn into this like ridiculous contortion,
yeah.
and I
Oh,
just wondered why.
it's so funny because I remember way back 10 years ago. I forgot I was just making I was a different person back then. I was making fun of somebody, and I was just like, why don't they just play piano? And now Greg says that to me because I'll be at rehearsal. I'm just like, oh, what if I had this note here? Just play the piano. Um, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but his father, Sam, was a piano player.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
I've heard all those stories. It's just more like
yeah,
the guy took all of these things that were so easy to do on other instruments and did them in such an unnecessarily difficult way. You know, like why
yeah.
not
Well,
change your guitar? I don't know if you've seen like some people they take a 7 string and they tune it in major thirds, like the whole guitar is major thirds.
oh yeah,
So then they
that's
have
cool.
total chord portability and no minor second is more than, what, 4 frets away. So you
Yeah,
can
but
build
it's
a lot of interesting chords that way.
yeah, but it's also limiting in another way. There's just some
Yeah,
things
of
that
course,
you will not be able
constraints
to play.
in everything,
So,
yeah.
I mean, I it's a shame I never got to really meet. I mean, I've been in the same room as Alan, but I never was able to talk to him. But
Yeah.
one of the things that I would be curious about is how would his playing evolve if he didn't have the hands to do it. But then I sort of think about me saying that and what his response would be, and I'm almost positive that his response would just be nothing would change. He would
Yeah.
just play simpler versions of that same idea. And I think a lot of those chords are also more unique because how else are you going to play them? The guitar, the way that it's tuned, large interval jumps are relatively easy,
Hmm.
but smaller ones are obviously trickier. So it's just getting something fresher or different and saying, "Oh, I haven't done this," or just exploring. And I mean, Alan also used some tricks with the syntax, like I mentioned
Oh yeah. Yeah.
that song so long. The top four strings are an octave lower. So I mean the top three strings. I'm sorry. So a lot of the chords that are in that tune are actually not complicated at all. But if you were to hear all the notes are so you haven't like the first chord of the tune is a I think it's a I'm blanking out here. I think it's a D major at 9.
Uh-huh.
No, so D major at 11. It's an F sharp, G, A, and a D, all right next to each other. Now that chord shape, when you're tuned that same way, is really not difficult. It's I think one of the add 11 chords that I have in the book, but hearing it, it's just so like impossible to like how are you supposed to play like this? So sometimes he would employ like tuning tricks to get more interesting chords, or like he would use harmonizers, especially on Metal Fatigue, just like okay, everything's just harmonized the perfect fourth or perfect fifth up, just to be able to play something that's different, or even tuning in fifths. Like some of the chords in Distance versus Desire are so wide that they actually I don't think they can really be played on piano unless you're
Right.
Litz or someone that had
List. Yeah.
huge hands. I think Steve Hunt said that he had difficulty in some of those chords. He had to like use his nose or something because now you even made the spectrum of what you can play on the guitar even wider. So you have
Right.
really huge intervals now. So he
Yeah.
was just always experimenting with this kind of stuff. So I think it was just like I've never seen Alan play a regular G chord, like just a regular open G or like some of your
Right.
basic, open chords. So I think it was just wanted his own vocabulary, and that's what this book really is. It's sort of like this is what I think his sort of chordal vocabulary is, because there are times where there are parts that are like, okay, it's just A minor here, where he plays a lot of the same few voicings. How like normal guitar players who are taught in a more traditional way would have maybe 3 or 4 different ways of playing A minor, but they would all be very like generic, like how everyone else plays them.
Right.
His versions of that would just be weirder.
Yeah.
Just like okay, I want to use this shape, I want to use that, but they were normal to him. But
Yeah.
for him to stand out and to be, which I think he was so guarded about, he worked so hard to be such an individual that he didn't like people sort of comping his style. And I think part of that is to help people on their own approach, but I think also part of that is like I worked really hard to be unique in every aspect of my playing, that I don't want someone to just like sound like me and do what I spent all that difficult,
Right.
all that time to do.
Yeah, I heard a quote. It was either in a video or something I read where he talked about how he hated the sound of a pull off. And even
Yeah,
just pulling off, he said it was like a mini tap, like a finger tap,
yeah,
not an actual pull off. And I just thought, yeah, this guy, he got it. He got to every single detail and made it his own.
yeah. I
Pretty
have to
cool.
actually talk about that in that
In your solo.
whenever I do that solo video because his action is so stupidly low and his neck is so straight that in order to get that sound, because there's a lot of times his hand just goes.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the same way that you would play a keyboard. If you just went up to a keyboard and just like tickle the ivories, and that's almost like what he was doing with his left hand. So
Right,
you
right.
need really, really, really low action in order to kind of do that, where you're basically hammering on and pulling off from nowhere.
Yep,
Where
yep.
if I can't do that on my guitar because the action's a bit too high.
Yeah.
But he was so meticulous about all of these different aspects of his playing. Even when he said the funny thing that major 7 in the REH video goes, "Oh, this is a really interesting voicing for this," and the nicer sounding one he found disgusting.
Hmm.
Like, no, he's the only person on the planet that thought that voicing was disgusting. It was just, I think it
I
was about
know,
one
right?
three five seven. It's just like the
Hmm.
simplest version of a major 7, but he plays one that has a flat 9 in it,
Yeah.
which is the most dissonant interval. And I remember hearing that and going, "This sounds terrible." But and actually, to talk about a point before, I think also what happens is the more familiar you get with these sounds, and it's something that I thought I came up with, and then I think Rick Beato did a video about it, is like an immunity to dissonance.
Yeah.
Because things don't sound dissonant anymore. They
Hmm.
just sound like interesting ways of playing something else.
Hmm.
Or how you hear that chord was off. So now when I hear that major 7 in Allan's instructional video, it doesn't sound dissonant to me. I hear the major 7 in that. But it's like, when you get addicted to hot sauce, it takes more hot sauce to like get that same thing. It's the same thing with dissonance. It's like, okay, I've got a dominant chord. Okay, well then I'm going to add in the sharp, the sharp 5, and then I'm going to start doing this, and then what you thought sounded cool now doesn't sound cool anymore, and you've got to
Yep.
really push the envelope until it's like, you've got a chord that just sounds like, like a mess.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, if you listen, I listened to the Abington Chasp today on One
Uh,
of a Kind, and that solo, the guitar solo in the middle of the song, is just one of the most beautiful melodic guitar solos I've ever heard. You didn't hear anything like that after 1985 or,
yeah,
1990. He didn't play like that anymore. He
yeah,
just really, really went down that path. All right,
yeah.
cool.
He's
John,
good.
where do we get your book? How do we buy it?
Well, you can get it through Amazon Kindle because it was the cheapest and simplest way to publish it. But if you don't have that, you can actually just contact me directly.
And how do they do that?
You can email me at john@terriginous.com.